Live. We are live. I'm doing well, new Justice McCann. It's great to see that you were just, so, confirmed to the court. So I'm glad to see that. hmm that's a great question. Pure shock. I gotta tell you, pure shock. I mean, we had Uberfeld and I had prepared, uh, you know, what we were gonna do, how we would approach losing the election, how we would approach the transition of power, because as you know, Uberfeld is currently the Secretary of State, so he wouldn't be involved. He would be involved in that transition of power. You know how I would help Brett set up the presidency, how I would get him to be the most effective president that he could be, and then we were told. I think the Brett campaign and our campaign was told by the moderator, that I was told by Adam, that there was a significant amount of fraud in this election. We didn't know how much fraud. We thought that it would just narrow the margin from 10% to something like 2-3 votes, and it did. As you know, the live results up until the post by Adam showed that we were losing by, I think, 2 or 3 votes. So we were always prepared for that scenario. And you as soon as Adam said you won, I my jaw dropped. I gotta tell you. Hmm. Yes, former Representative-elect Paula Files had an interesting quote. He said, "If Robert pulls this one out of his ass again, I swear to God." And we sure enough did. We sure enough did. Yes. So it was probably one of the most exciting points in my career in this community, for sure. Well, I mean, just to clarify, we don't know the specifics of this plan yet. We don't know if there will be some legislation that stays in. We don't know. Yeah, we really have no specifics on this plan. What I was doing with that post is expressing my support for um, some sort of legislative reset in this community. Last season I had been opposed to the idea. For a majority of my time in this community, I've been opposed to the idea, but it was explained to me in a private call. I don't know if that person wants their name revealed, so I won't do it here. Uh, it was explained to me how an implementation of this plan could work in a way that boosts the community. For a long time, I had thought a legislative reset would kill this community. But I think now, at this point in season 28 of mock election history, I think we need to move forward with some sort of legislative reset as an approach to save the community. Well, I see this playing out as a referendum, or I'm hoping it plays out as referendum. You know, the big structural change that we've gotten done in my term has been through referendum. You know, I didn't spearhead this approach. I give all the credit to Ethan Fitzgerald for this, but 4812, I helped, you know, convince a couple of people to vote for that, and I was proud at the small amount of work I did. Again, Ethan Fitzgerald deserves most of the credit for that. But 4812 was done through a referendum. We have that done now. That's going to make this community more realistic and engaging. Governors, we got that done through a referendum. You know, I fought extremely hard to make sure that that passed, and it passed virtually overwhelmingly. Uh, and we're going to get ranked choice voting done through referendum extremely soon. And I'm working closely with the moderators to ensure that happens. And I think the best way for any huge fundamental reform like this to happen is through public opinion. And I think without that, um, the community, the executive, the moderators in Congress lose the trust of the American people and the citizens of this community because they usurp their ability to make this decision for themselves. So, I mean, while I come out in support of a legislative reset, also support, and the only way I will support an implementation of a legislative reset is through referendum, through public opinion. And if public opinion decides against the legislative reset, then public opinion decides against the legislative reset. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think I don't really think MEC remembers legislative achievement as much as it does the environment of the community when you're president. So I think I would be most proud of, um, or one of the things I'm proud of a lot of things. So it's hard for me to choose and pick uh, one out of all of the great things that I think I've accomplished in my many terms in my career in this community. But I think for me, one of the most prouder moments in my career has been the amount of toxicity that we had in season 23 and in my presidency. We decreased toxicity a lot, and I think the environment in of the community at that time was very peaceful. You know, peacefuler than it usually is. Of course, it's never peaceful, but it was more peaceful than it usually is, and people were content. People were willing to have fruitful political discussions. People were willing to have competitive and fun elections, and there were some interesting elections in that. We talked about politics, we talked about the things going on in the summer, and that was an election where that was a term where maybe there wasn't as much that got done legislatively as I would liked, but what we talked about in that campaign was, you know, changing the environment of this community, changing the power structure of this community. Who has the most power in this community, and how is that power distributed? We did both of that in my first term, and that's probably what I'm most proud of, being able to work with Tim Taft to change the environment of the entire community and make it a place where fruitful political discussion can thrive. Unfortunately, in the president's in unfortunately in a certain president preceding me, uh, that work was undermined, and that led to a lot of the inactivity problems that we see today, which I'm working to do again. But you know, we're also focused on a lot. So Hmm. Well, yes, that was going to be in the announcement later tonight, but that's okay. I'll announce it here. Yes, we are going to be expanding the court to 5 members. We think that this allows for more engaging and fruitful, not legislative, more fruitful legal discussion on the court, and will allow for a wider range of uh, political views and opinions to be presented on the court, which I think only serves to help engage the community and make the judicial branch in this community more of a interesting branch to watch. The people that I've appointed to the court, I don't necessarily agree with on every issue. I think that's prevalent with the Chief Justice Chase Stevens, of whom I disagree with on a number of issues, including abortion, corporations, and a number of legal rights that he and I have argued on numerous amounts of occasions. I think you and I have some disagreements, and Kenneth and I have some disagreements. But the point is to have uh, strong legal minds in the court, and that's what I've tried to do in this, but by filling the court, and that's what I'll continue to do by expanding the court. Like you said, I have been one of the more successful presidents when it comes to the Supreme Court, and filling an entire court by one man is seems like it would be corruption at its core. But what I think I've done in the vetting process and in the process to choose a nominee for the Supreme Court is actually look at their political ideologies and how that would shape up into a court that would be most effective for the American people. So, yeah. Mhm. Well, because I'm someone who understands the legal system in this country. I'm someone who's studied law for the past 4 years, and I understand the importance of the Supreme Court. If we didn't have a Supreme Court in this community, then we would be facing a ton of problems that the legislative branch wouldn't be able to address, which would leave those problems to the moderators, and I respect the moderators greatly. They're uh, more fair and democratic than they have ever been. Uh, but I think that they should be as little involved in the political and legislative ongoings in MEC as possible. In MEC as possible. Another thing is the Supreme Court needs to look at the legislation passed by Congress, look at the legislation that I sign, and see if it's marked unconstitutional or not. That's one of the main jobs of the Supreme Court. And if we don't have someone who's a check and balance on the legislative and executive branches, then we have a mismatched government. Our government is three co-equal branches of government, and missing one of those branches of government puts off the whole system into imbalance, and we have to change that. And that's why my drive to expand and fill the Supreme Court is so prevalent and such a big priority in my administration and the administration moving forward. Hmm. Well, I mean, again, Ethan Fitzgerald was the one who mainly pushed this, but yes, I am the first president to go through this 4812, and I think it'll be beneficial to the presidency. I think um, one of my problems and one of the problems that is brought up by almost every um, former president in this community is the stress of the job, and that the stress of the job uh, really is most of the stress of the job is predicated off the fact that the time to get things done is so little. And expanding it by 2 weeks doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually gives the presidency and the executive branch uh, what feels like months of more time to get so much more work done. So I think it'll ultimately be beneficial to this community and this government um, to have for 12 weeks, and I'm looking forward to my expanded term and ensuring that I can get even more work done in this term. But it will be a little weird to adjust after this. I mean, at 6 week point, I'll be like, oh, I should be leaving the presidency now. So that might be a little weird to adjust to. But I think other than that, it'll be a beneficial change. Mhm. Yeah. Hmm. Yes, we did. No, I don't. I think the Senate deserves the longest term by far, and I think 12 weeks is a good term for that. The Senate is a interesting branch, or not branch, interesting part of the legislative branch of government. It's more of an overseer branch, and I think the 12-week term um, drives people to elect people to the Senate that actually understand what they're doing, that actually understand how to get it done, and it also gives us more of an opportunity to enforce the inactivity laws in the Senate. So if there is an inactive senator, then we can deal with that accordingly and make an appointment of someone who actually truly cares about this community. Um, 12 weeks allows the Senate to get more work, as it does the presidency, to get more work done than they could ever get done. I think um, I see your point, but I just fundamentally think that 12 weeks is a fine amount of time. And if you look at the examples from other similar mock government sims, they have 3 month, 4 month senates that are that's I think a little ridiculous for this community, but it works and it makes the Senate more of a prestigious role, and it makes the Senate more than just a glorified House of Representatives, which in many senses is how it is currently. Hello, Attorney General. I think I don't know if you weren't here, you probably didn't watch the interview, but as I said before, I have a uh, deep understanding of the law and how it works in this country, and I've studied law for 3 or 4 years. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know everything about law, but the law is the bottom line in this country, and it needs to be respected at every point of the way. Uh, yeah. So, I mean, yes, to answer your question, I mean, you interrupted me a couple of times, so messed up my answer, but yes. I mean, what are you leading up to with this gotcha question? I believe in the law. I respect the law. Yes. Isn't that what believing in the law is? Yes. I've answered the question. Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and take criticism for appointing Kenneth to the Supreme Court. Well, I appointed Kenneth to the Supreme Court because he has been deeply committed to this community. He has been, over the course of 2 years, been engaged and committed to this. I mean, there's been a couple of times where he's left the community, but I mean, he's been engaged and committed to this community for the majority of the time that he's been here, and he's passed a number of pieces of legislation. He's done good work in this community, and while I disagree with many of the things he says, that doesn't mean that his opinion is any less so than any others. And I think that his voice on the Supreme Court, along with Chase Stevens, Terrell McCann, and two others, would be a fine addition to the court. And that's why I also appointed someone to the Supreme Court that actually had some understanding of the law. And the pool of people that actually have an understanding of the law that actually want to be in the Supreme Court is very small in this community. So yes, I did choose Kenneth, but he's one of few that actually understands the basics of the law. He might have a different interpretation of the law than you do, but uh, he will add a good voice to this court, and he will do fine work, I'm sure. I I'm not aware of that, and I also don't know if that's true. That's not. I mean, if he's been convicted of that, then that's a totally different story. But that's an accusation. Who made this event? uh, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you can go ahead. Who is it? What news organization is it? I think that's Harry Crosby or Epidelli. I'm not sure. Okay, so to address what just happened, I mean, I'm not aware of this. I haven't gotten a full briefing on this. I'm sure I will in the moments after in this interview. This happened as I was in this interview, so I don't have the full information on this as of this time. But what I can say is I condemn political violence at all turns. What I think, if you want to really make change, if you want to really oppose um, the fascist movement or right-wing nationalism, both of which I disagree with and oppose wholeheartedly, then use civil disobedience and peaceful protest. That's the way you accomplish things. Violence is not the answer. Malcolm X uh, isn't the one who championed the civil rights movement as much as Martin Luther King did. Who do you remember more, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X? It's probably Martin Luther King. That's, well, both people, but Martin Luther King is more famous in those in the civil rights circles. That's my point. You remember Martin Luther King more because he used civil disobedience to make big fundamental change in this country. That's what I have done in my terms as president. That's what I've done as a private citizen. That's what I've done as a senator, and that's what I've done as a member of the House. Well, let me just finish. Let me just finish real quick. I completely condemn using political violence, and to the people that died, I feel deeply sorry to you. I feel deeply sorry for the people um, that had the mentality where they thought that killing somebody was a way to get things done or a way to oppose a nationalism, and killing people will only exacerbate the nationalist and right-wing movement. Uh, Shoot. I will be appearing on that television show as well, just to let you know. I'm Joy, of course. Oh Lord. Anti-Semitism is no joke. I also condemn anti-Semitism, by the way. Correct. I can't think of a single time that Kenneth Quinones has. I would love for you to provide proof. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm just saying I haven't seen it. If Thank you, Terrell. It was good to be here. I look forward.